My grandmother left me $35 million, and the lawyer who called to tell me said something else, right after, something that made the money feel like nothing at all. He said, "Mrs. Calloway, I need you to sit down for this part." I was already sitting. I didn't know yet that the ground was about to disappear underneath me anyway. My name is Alina Reyes. Well, Alina Calloway, though I don't know how much longer I'll be using that name. And 3 weeks ago, my life still made sense. That's the strange thing about the day everything falls apart. It never announces itself. It just walks in wearing an ordinary Tuesday. I was standing in my kitchen making coffee, half listening to the news, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Local area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. I wish some nights that I had. Is this Alina Calloway, granddaughter of Margaret Whitfield? I hadn't heard my grandmother's full name spoken out loud in years, not since the funeral. She passed 8 months ago, quietly in her sleep, the way she'd always said she wanted to go. We weren't close, not in the way people mean when they say that word. She lived 2 states away, sent birthday cards with $20 bills folded inside, called on Christmas. I loved her. I just didn't know her, not really. Not the way I thought I did. "Yes," I said, "that's me. My name is Arthur Beckman. I'm an attorney handling your grandmother's estate. There are some matters we need to discuss regarding her will." I remember laughing, a small, confused laugh, the kind you laugh when you think someone's about to tell you a joke. Her will? I thought that was already settled months ago. "There's been a complication," he said, and something in his voice, careful, measured, like a man walking across ice, made my stomach tighten before he even explained. It turned out my grandmother hadn't just left behind a modest house and some savings, the way everyone in the family assumed. She'd left behind an oil trust from her father's side of the family, dormant for decades, quietly accumulating value that no one had bothered to track. $35 million. The number didn't even feel real when he said it. It felt like something from a movie, something that happens to other people, people with different lives than mine. "There's no mistake?" I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "No mistake," Arthur said. "But Mrs. Calloway, there's something else, something time-sensitive, and I think it's best we discuss it in person. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" I should have asked more questions right then. I know that now. But I was still holding onto the words $35 million like a person holds onto a life raft, not thinking about what might be swimming underneath it. I drove to his office on autopilot, my hands doing the work while my mind spun through 100 different futures. I thought about paying off the house. I thought about my husband, Daniel, and how his face would look when I told him. 6 years married, and money had always been the quiet tension between us. Not a fight, exactly, just a low hum underneath everything, the kind you stop noticing until someone points it out. Daniel worked in logistics, steady but unremarkable pay. I taught 3rd grade. We were fine. We were always just fine. I thought, driving there, that this was the day we stopped being just fine. Arthur Beckman's office was on the 9th floor of a glass building downtown, the kind of place with leather chairs and a receptionist who says, "Right this way," instead of "Go on back." He was older, maybe 60, with reading glasses pushed up into gray hair and a folder in front of him thick enough to be a small book. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I want to start by congratulating you. Your grandmother's estate is substantial. You are, as of her passing, the sole beneficiary of a very significant inheritance." $35 million, I said, still tasting the strangeness of the words. "Correct, but I need to walk you through the terms of the trust because they're unusual, and I need you to listen carefully before you make any decisions, especially decisions about who you tell and when." Something about the way he said especially decisions, about who you tell made the hair on my arms rise. "Your grandmother," he continued, "was very particular about this money. She'd watched wealth destroy people in her own family, her father, her brother. She built specific protections into this trust, protections that legally activate the moment you take possession of the funds." "What kind of protections?" He slid a document across the desk. I didn't understand half the legal language, but he walked me through it slowly, patiently, like a doctor delivering test results he already knew were bad. The trust included what he called a marital insulation clause. If I was married at the time the inheritance was formally transferred into my name, the funds would automatically be treated as premarital separate property, completely untouchable, completely mine, protected from any future claim in a divorce. But there was a catch. A strange, specific catch that made my breath catch in my throat. For the clause to activate, Arthur said, the inheritance has to be formally accepted and recorded before you disclose its existence to your spouse. If your husband learns about this money before the transfer is legally finalized, even informally, even in a conversation at your kitchen table, the protection dissolves. The funds would then be considered marital property from the moment of disclosure forward. So I just don't tell him until the paperwork is done. That's one option, Arthur said, and here his voice changed, quieter, heavier. But that's not actually why I asked you to come in today. He paused. He took off his glasses, cleaned them with a small cloth, put them back on, like a man buying himself 10 more seconds before he had to say something he didn't want to say. Mrs. Calloway, as part of standard estate processing, we run a full legal and records check on the beneficiary and their immediate household. It's routine, boring, usually. But something came back on your file 3 days ago, and I've been sitting on it because I didn't know how to tell you over the phone. My hands went cold around the arms of the chair. What came back? According to state records, he said slowly, a divorce filing was submitted 7 weeks ago, processed, finalized 17 days later, under your name and your husband's name. The room tilted, just slightly, the way it does right before you understand something you already suspected, but never let yourself think. That's impossible, I said. We're not divorced. We had dinner together last night. He kissed me goodbye this morning. Arthur looked at me with something that wasn't quite pity, but was close to it. Careful, sad. I'm not saying you're divorced in the way you understand the word, Mrs. Calloway, he said quietly. I'm saying that legally, on paper, in the eyes of the state, you already are. Arthur let the words sit there between us, heavy as stone. I remember staring at him, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was a clerical error, a mix-up with another Alina Calloway somewhere in the state database. He didn't laugh. He just reached into that thick folder and slid another paper across the desk. And I saw my name printed there in black ink, next to Daniel's, next to a case number, next to a date that meant nothing to me and apparently everything to my marriage. I need to see it, I said, all of it. He walked me through it slowly. 7 weeks ago, which meant, I realized, 3 days after my grandmother's funeral, 3 days after I'd sat in a folding chair in a small church watching them lower her casket, a divorce petition had been filed. Not by me, by Daniel. Uncontested, he'd said in the filing, because I had allegedly signed a waiver agreeing not to appear in court. My signature was on that waiver. I stared at it for a long time. It looked like mine. It moved like mine, the same slant, the same loop on the L in my name. But I had never signed it. I would have remembered signing away my own marriage. Someone forged this, I said, and my voice came out strange, thin, like it belonged to someone else. That's what we need to determine, Arthur said gently. But Mrs. Calloway, I have to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Is it possible your husband knew about your grandmother's estate before you did? I opened my mouth to say no, of course not, and then I stopped. Because a memory surfaced, uninvited, the way memories do when you finally start looking for them instead of looking away. 2 months ago, I'd come home early from school, a teacher workday cut short, and found Daniel in our home office with the door mostly closed, talking on the phone in a low voice I didn't recognize. When I asked who it was, he said just work. A little too fast, a little too smooth. I hadn't thought about it since. I hadn't wanted to. There might be something, I said quietly. I don't know. Arthur nodded slowly, like a man confirming something he already feared. I'd strongly advise you not to go home tonight and confront him. Not yet. I know that's the hardest thing I could ask of you right now. But if this filing is fraudulent, we need evidence intact. His devices, his accounts, whatever correspondence exists. If you walk in there tonight and accuse him, He has time to erase everything before we can prove what happened. You think he did this on purpose? You think he found out about the money? I think, Arthur said carefully, that a forged divorce filed 3 days after your grandmother's funeral, right before a $35 million trust activates a marital protection clause, is not a coincidence I'm comfortable ignoring. I drove home that evening with my hands shaking on the wheel, replaying 6 years of my marriage like a film reel, searching every frame for something I'd missed. Daniel proposing to me on a rainy October night, so nervous his voice cracked. Daniel holding my hand in the hospital when my father died. Daniel who cried, actually cried, at our wedding. I didn't want to believe the man who did those things could sit across from me at dinner, kiss me goodbye in the morning, and quietly steal my life out from under me in the space between. But that night, I watched him differently. I watched him check his phone twice during dinner, angling the screen away from me out of habit, not suspicion, like he'd been doing it so long he didn't even notice anymore. I watched him avoid my eyes when I mentioned, carefully, casually, that Arthur Beckman had called about grandmother's estate. "Oh yeah," Daniel said, not looking up from his plate. "Everything okay?" "Just paperwork," I said. "You know how these things drag on." He nodded, too quickly, and changed the subject to something about his brother's fantasy football team. And I sat there smiling and nodding, and feeling something inside my chest crack quietly down the middle. The following days were the strangest of my life, living inside a marriage that the law said no longer existed, sleeping beside a man who might have engineered his own escape with my signature forged onto the door. Arthur worked fast. He hired a forensic document examiner who confirmed within 4 days that the signature was, in his words, a highly competent forgery, likely traced rather than free-handed. He also pulled phone records, with a court order, and found what we were both dreading and expecting. 6 calls over the past 3 months between Daniel's cell phone and a number registered to a woman named Priya Shah, a paralegal, it turned out, at a small firm 2 towns over. Not Arthur's firm. A different one. One that specialized, Arthur said grimly, in exactly this kind of quiet, fast, under-the-radar filing. I confronted Daniel on a Sunday morning, in our kitchen, the same kitchen where this whole nightmare had started with a phone call 3 weeks earlier. I didn't scream. I'd imagined screaming in the days leading up to it, imagined throwing things, imagined every version of rage a person can imagine. But when I actually stood across from him, holding the folder Arthur had given me, all I felt was a terrible, quiet grief. "I know about the filing," I said. "I know about Priya Shah. I know you forged my signature." Daniel's face didn't crumble the way I expected. It went still instead, careful, like a man recalculating in real time. "Alina." "Don't," I said. "Don't start with my name like that, like you're about to comfort me." "It's not what you think," he said, and even as the words left his mouth, I watched him understand how hollow they sounded. "Then tell me what it is. Tell me why there's a divorce filed against me that I never agreed to. Tell me why it happened 3 days after my grandmother's funeral, right before her lawyer told me I inherited $35 million. The silence that followed answered every question I hadn't asked out loud. "I heard you on the phone," he finally said, quiet, defeated. "2 months ago, talking about the trust, about the oil rights. I wasn't supposed to hear it. It was your cousin. She called your phone by accident and I picked it up before I realized." He stopped, started again. "I panicked. I thought if we were already divorced by the time it came through legally, you'd still get everything and I could come back later, after things settled. We could remarry. I never meant it to be real, Alina." "I just meant it to be paper." "You forged my name on a legal document," I said, and my voice finally broke, not from anger, but from the sheer, bottomless sadness of hearing him explain it like it was something reasonable. "You erased our marriage without asking me, while I was grieving my grandmother, so you could try to get half of money you didn't even know the full amount of yet." "I know how it sounds." "You don't," I whispered. "You don't know how it sounds at all." I want to tell you I found some dramatic strength in that moment, some cinematic clarity. The truth is smaller and sadder than that. I just felt tired. Tired in a way that lived in my bones. I picked up my folder and I walked out of the kitchen, and I didn't look back at him, not because I was strong, but because I couldn't bear to see his face and still recognize the man I loved inside it. The criminal case moved slowly, the way these things do. Forgery, attempted fraud, Arthur handled the civil side while the district attorney's office handled the rest. Daniel didn't go to prison in the end. A plea deal, probation, restitution for legal fees. Priya Shah lost her paralegal license. I never spoke to either of them again. The court voided the fraudulent filing, which meant legally we had to actually divorce. A real one this time, one I signed with my own hand in Arthur's office, 6 months after that first phone call in my kitchen. And because the fraud was proven before the trust transferred, the marital insulation clause held exactly the way my grandmother had designed it to. Every dollar protected. Hers, then mine, untouched by any of it. I think about her sometimes, my grandmother, and the quiet, careful way she built a wall around this money before she ever knew it would need to hold. She used to tell me, when I was young, that money doesn't change people. It just removes the reasons they had for hiding who they already were. I didn't understand what she meant until I was standing in my own kitchen, watching 6 years of marriage dissolve into a folder of forged paperwork. I bought a small house by the coast with some of the money, nothing extravagant, just quiet, just mine. I still teach 3rd grade some mornings because I like who I am in that classroom, and $35 million didn't change that part of me at all. I don't hate Daniel anymore. Some nights I still grieve him, or maybe I grieve the version of him I believed in for 6 years, the one who never actually existed outside of my own hope. What I remember most, though, isn't the money, and it isn't even the betrayal. It's Arthur's voice on that first phone call, careful and slow, telling me to sit down. And I think about how strange it is that the truth of my marriage arrived in the same breath as the truth of my fortune, as if the universe wanted me to understand, all at once, exactly what was real and exactly what had only ever been paper.